Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's Inspirational Ambassador story. My name is Louis Del Verto. I'm a network connector here at Teach First, and I am delighted to be joined by the wonderful Vanessa Sefa. Vanessa, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, thanks so much for being here today. Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to dive right in with some questions because I know that people are going to much rather hear from you than they are from me. So, by way of an introduction, could you give us a bit of an overview about your career journey from participating in the Teach First program through to where you are now?
Yeah, so I did the Teach First program and I started in 2019. So 2019 cohort finished in 2021. And during that time made loads of friends, made met loads of people, had some great connections, and it's great following people's journeys. Since being on the program, within those 2 years, I was situated in a school in South London, in the area which I grew up in, which is one that I'd actually put as one of my preferences. And then after that, I've moved from that school to the school I'm currently at, also in South London and also in the borough that I've grown up in. And I'm now a senior leader, so I'm a lead practitioner in the school that I've moved to, and my area of focus is reading.
That's incredible. That's some swift growth, and your journey started a little before that, didn't it? Because you were actually a brand manager at the University of York way back when. Um,
Yes.
what was it? What was it that kind of inspired you to start that journey? What is it that motivates you to kind of continue to support children from or support the education of children from disadvantaged communities?
So I'd say, as you've mentioned, I was an ambassador at university, but even before that, my school, funnily enough, when I was in secondary school, was a Teach First school. So Teach First has literally like always been around me, basically. So when I was a lot of my teachers were Teach Firsters, which was a really nice experience. Didn't really know it at the time. But years later, when I've spoken to teachers, they sort of kind of said to me, "Oh, I was on a Teach First program. It was, great having your class, great having you in the class, etc." And it's kind of like, oh wow, knowing that I wanted to go into teaching, it kind of encouraged me to find out more about the Teach First program. Ended up obviously loving the program. It's loving the ethos that Teach First kind of pushes. And then that kind of pushed me to say, this is the program for me for training, because my values align so well with it.
That's awesome. It's so great to hear. And I think it's the way that you can make the biggest difference, really, isn't it? Working in schools such as the one that you trained in. And what is it that you're teaching? What's your subject specialism?
So my area of specialism is English. So I'm in secondary education as well.
Oh, that's awesome. What was it that made you why English?
So why English? I think it's always one of those questions where it's like there's so many parts to it. Beyond the fact that I enjoyed it, for me personally, English is something that is quite personal to like my family in the sense of my mum moved to the UK in the 90s, and she doesn't speak much English herself. School isn't something that my mum had much of either. So my mum stopped going to school when she was in year four, because being Ghanaian, in Ghana, you did pay for education yourself as opposed to having it free, how you have it here in the UK. So she didn't study much in school, so she's not necessarily the best reader or the best writer, and English is pretty much her fourth language. So it's not something that she's got much experience with in that sense. So English is something that from a young age, being born here, I then had to pick up a lot of the responsibilities for. So I was, translating documents at a ridiculously young age, or I was doing things like helping to communicate with a company on the phone to explain a certain circumstance, whatever it may be. So I think I took on English as a bit of like a job. And in doing that, I found how important it was to be good at the language in which was the main medium of communication. And in doing so, I then made sure that I would learn new words and practice new sentences, and get together with like reading new books and things like that to gather that kind of information. And doing those kind of things, it kind of fostered my love for English. And I guess, in situations where I might have been teaching my mum something, I think I kind of fell into loving teaching. So English and teaching kind of worked out quite well.
The perfect place for you, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know I know you quite well because I've obviously worked with you for a number of years. I know that you are incredibly passionate about English and about teaching, and I know that one of your other passions is the kind of diversification of the curriculum. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about what it is that you're doing both inside and outside of the classroom to address that?
Yeah, so I think diversity and inclusion is something that's really important and very close to my heart. So thinking about diversifying the curriculum or working within areas of social mobility and educational inequality generally, outside of the classroom, an example of something I do is I run a social media platform on Instagram called Education Cubed. And with that platform, effectively, I share like any research that I've learned, because that's a place where I clearly like to nerd out and like learn, share information that I found out. So Education Cube is where I do that. Equally, if there's any information or big news that's happened in education recently, that I can share in a bite-sized way that makes it something that people can take away and pass on and learn from, I try and do that. Beyond Education Cube, so the platform I set up over lockdown, other things that I've done is I've gotten involved with campaigns that Teach First have done, for example, the Missing Pages campaign, to share books that I've read that I wish I read at school, or things like talking about what could be done in order to diversify the curriculum generally, be it in English or science or health and nutrition. But those ideas of kind of talking about and shedding light on people from different backgrounds and ethnicities that also deserve a seat at that table, that also deserve to be spoken about and taught and passed on in schools. So those are like two examples, but beyond those, I think there's, in terms of outside the school, there's other organisations that I'm a part of, such as the Alito Foundation, which is one that supports young people from social mobility backgrounds that can deserve the support, be it to help them get graduate jobs, and also the African Caribbean Alumni Network, which is another one, again, for young people from African Caribbean backgrounds specifically, looking to kind of enter into fields or professions that they may not necessarily have connections or networks within. In my school in particular, or my two schools that I've been in, some of the things that I've tried to do specifically around the ideas of diversity and inclusion is I've in my first school, within my first few months, so Black History Month being in October, we had a few students who had kind of been somewhat labelled as difficult or hard to reach students, who I'd started to build a relationship with, and speaking to them about Black History Month, I'd ask them, what is it that school does, as it was my first year, for Black History Month? And the students and I had decided that we would do something for it. So what we had done is I'd gone to ask them for some supplies. They must have been thinking, what is an English teacher asking this for? Asked for some supplies, and then put together, the students had designed and put together a mural of effectively what was like a Black woman with an afro wearing a dashiki, and effectively used that as a way to represent what they thought would be a perfect way to represent them and what they believed should be done for Black History Month. So that was something that the students had done specifically. Other examples of things that I've done, which I actually didn't think at the time was much of a big deal, but I'd posted it more so because of the coincidence it had been Black History Month, was we had a time when the weather was terrible, and much like many days in the UK, the weather was terrible, and a student of mine had come to me where I was on pretty much the third floor and had said to me, Miss, my hair's been totally messed up by the rain, and I need you to sort my hair out right now. If you don't sort my hair, I'm going home. I'm not going to my lessons. I'm not taking off my hood, and that's going to be the end of the day. So I'd said to them, because it was like 15, we had about 10 minutes or so left of break. And I said, well, I've got no choice now. Let me just sort you out and try and see what I can do. And quickly had like done something quickly to sort out their hair so that they would be able to go to their lesson and they would be happy. In doing that, I'd made a little post on Twitter just to say, it's so interesting to me that the student had found me in this school building to help them with a hair concern, be it a Black student and a Black teacher. And it was the 1st of October that day. And I just thought it was such a coincidence that this had happened, and noted that this is why we do need, not the only reason, but this is one of the reasons why representation and the need for having Black teachers in schools. I literally made that post and went about my day, didn't even think about it, and it went entirely viral. Had like an interview by Good Morning America, and picked up by news channels, and was on TV and all these other things, purely from supporting a student in need at that time with something, and being a Black teacher that was in that right space for that student at that right time. So it's just like those kind of little examples there. The last example I can think of would be with Macbeth. It's a text I'm currently studying with my year 10s. And sometimes when Macbeth's the Shakespeare language, the language used by Shakespeare can be quite confusing. Sometimes what I try to do is almost break it down to them in standard English of today, or slang, because sometimes that makes a whole lot more sense to my students in my community. And I work with them and just explain it to them in slang, and then help them understand where you can understand this in slang. It means you understand it in Shakespearean phrasing. It's just, we just need to make sure you can translate it then in the right way in your exam. And sometimes that stepping stone is what's needed for our students to be able to relate to the story in a much better way, for them to be able to succeed and flourish in the ways that we know that they can.
This is huge work. Like, it's absolutely incredible. I don't know how you even begin to measure the impact of the work that you're doing, Vanessa. It's awesome. How does it make you feel, like, knowing that you're doing this work and having this impact?
I think in terms of how it makes me feel personally, I would probably say I'm not too sure about how it makes me feel, because I'm thinking more so about what it will do for other people. So I'm hoping that it makes them feel really good, and they feel like they're empowered, or they feel that they are in a position where they can do more. So my main aim, or my main thought in that process is, am I doing enough? Am I helping enough people with the point on the ladder that I'm at? And am I utilizing my time and my voice and my spaces that I'm in, and the leadership responsibilities and capacities that I have, to maximize the opportunities for people like myself, be it that I'm a female, be it that I'm Black, be it that I'm from a working class background, be it that I'm from a single parent home, be it that I was a student who had free school meals, and I was a pupil premium student in school. Whatever those kind of capacities are, am I doing my best to represent those individuals, and also give them the support and a role model in those ways, to know, hey, I can do this as well. Or, I have an example from today. For example, a student was like, oh, miss, I can't read this because I'm dyslexic. I said, yeah, so am I. So, I'm dyslexic too. We can struggle through this together, but the point is that you give it a go. And be it that it's a sentence, be it that it's a paragraph, but that opportunity for you to build up your kind of courage and your fluency is my main priority, as opposed to it being perfect. It's not about that at all. So yeah, I think that's more how I feel about it. I've kind of got my head down thinking, am I doing enough?
It certainly sounds like you are. It really does. And like, what's the response like when you have a conversation like that with one of your pupils around like dyslexia, for example? Like, how do they respond to that? How do they respond to you?
I think a lot of the time, especially with dyslexia, I'm being an English teacher. I mean, I can understand the confusion, but I think a lot of the time they are very surprised that, one, you're an adult and you can relate to something that they as a student feel that they are going through. Because a lot of the time, when I was a student anyway, and how it seems for the students that I teach as well, is this idea that adults and young people are very different. And sometimes when a student, for example, talks about how they may be dyslexic, it's almost as if they don't recognize that this is something that when you're an adult, it still follows you, and you will, for example, still be dyslexic in the future. And I think often that's because as an adult, you learn lots of coping mechanisms or strategies to kind of work through things. So you don't necessarily speak about it in the way that you may do as a young person. And I think that's why it's important when I'm in the classroom to be visible in those ways and say, I am a person who is dyslexic. So, and I am an adult who is at work and is able to do well and is able to succeed. So being dyslexic isn't seen as something that holds you down from being able to do other things. And I think with that in mind, it kind of makes kind of students kind of go, oh, okay, I guess that means I do have to do work. I guess that means I can do work. And it doesn't mean that therefore this is the end of a story. And it's more so like a comma in that.
Yeah, for sure. You're such a strong role model for these kids in your school, for these children in your school. Do you feel like you had someone like that when you were at school?
I think when I was at school, I had quite a few different teachers that I loved, and I took like loads of little things from. So one of my teachers was Mr. Alamu, and he was my RE teacher and my form tutor from, I think it was like year 9 through to year 11. And he was one of, I think he was a teacher who joined the school around the time that I joined, and he was somebody who I thought just was really cool. Like he was quite young. He spoke like me. He kind of grew up in an area similar, so he understood a lot of like things that we were saying or what we were talking about. He was Nigerian, so he was West African, similar to me. So it was quite cool. So when he met my mum, it was like I didn't feel like I needed to explain like or translate almost things that my mum was saying when she was saying it in English, but be it broken, because he understood what she was saying and he understood what that meant. So it was really nice to have that. And in him believing in a lot of things that I said and what I was aiming to do, what was really helpful with that was that that kind of belief in me kind of made me feel like I almost needed to prove that because you believe in me or because I almost enjoy being in your class so much, I'm going to try even harder. And I remember like with my RE GCSE, I got like 100% on the exam for GCSE. And I was so proud. And I came back to school and I was like, I did it. I got 100%. And I went on and took that for A-level. So Mr. Alamy was definitely one of those teachers. And I had some great teachers in PE. So my PE teachers were lovely. And they were teachers that like I till this day I'm still able to speak to and reach out to. So like Miss Adams and all my other ones, and like it was a great to have them.
That's awesome. They're really, really kind of enduring relationships then that you're still able to speak with them. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And in terms of like kind of that sense of kind of building relationships, you're obviously a part of the ambassador community now. You've been an ambassador for a couple of years. What does it mean to you to be an ambassador with Teach First?
I think being an ambassador is a bit of a badge of honor. And I say that in the sense of Teach First is notoriously tough. And I think with that in mind, it's not tough in the sense of Teach First is trying to make it difficult for you so that you can't do the program, but it's tough in the sense of there is so much to learn and it's literally an upward trajectory. And with that in mind, once you finish the program, I see it as a badge of honor because you are so proud of what you've achieved once you're able to look back. Because sometimes during the process, when you're at the trough instead of at the peak of your journey, it can feel like it's a long way up. But once you've kind of finished that program and you've come to the end of it and you see what you've done, how far you've come, or even sometimes I look back at my lessons that I made in my first month, year of teaching, and I think, what was I doing? And I can see how far I've come. I think it's honestly something that kind of leaves you in awe, because you're kind of like, wow, you know, it's not an experience that many people would be able to relate to, even if they did a graduate program. So it's very different, and it's something that I'm definitely proud to say that I'm a part of that kind of community.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. And you're right. It is a very, very challenging program to know that, you know, you've come through it. And not only come through it, but really thrived over the past few years is unreal. And you should be so proud of yourself, Vanessa.
Thank you.
I've got one more question for you. So you know that we're marking 20 years since Teach First's first cohort started Summer Institute. What does 20 years of Teach First mean to you? What do you think when you hear that?
So when I think of Teach First in 20 years, I think back to a lot of the changes and ambitions and visions that Teach First had set out to make in the beginning. So prior to me even joining Teach First, as I said, like, it's something that I believed my values aligned with. So I really researched the program before I joined it. But like thinking about Teach First when it first started, and like part of the American kind of version of Teach First came over to help launch it, and the visions that they had then, I think Teach First has probably outdone itself in what it's achieved based on where it thought it would go, especially in the time frame that it's done it in. And I think Teach First has changed and developed. It's learned from criticism. It has matured in its program. It's developed new limbs in how it's gone about dealing with the inequalities and issues that we have in the UK specifically. And I think Teach First, in doing what it's done, has become unique in its own right and deserving of the praise that it gets. And with this in mind, I think Teach First in its 20 years, it's amazing. What it's done is amazing. So I can't imagine what it's going to do in the next 20. So basically, we wish it many more, and long live Teach First.
I couldn't agree more. What a great way to put it. Well, yeah, those are all of the questions I had, Vanessa. Thank you so much, as ever, for taking the time to chat to me and to share your thoughts. It's awesome to hear from you. As ever, now, if you don't mind me saying, I know that you're attending the Great Ambassador Gathering on
I'll be there.
Yes, Saturday, 1st of July. I can't wait to see you.
Yes.
So for everyone that's watching today, you've had a chance to hear a little bit more from Vanessa. Why not come along and meet her in person, chat to her about your career and your ambassador journey. So you'll be able to register for the event using the link in this video description. But for now, Vanessa, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you in a few weeks' time.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. Can't wait to meet people there. Can't wait to speak to everyone, find out what they're doing, their journeys, what they're doing now. So yeah, can't wait. See you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa. Take care.